Many of us go through life completely unaware that we have an image or images of ourselves that we project to the world and that make us feel that we can be accepted this way when we are seen as this image. But when we start to unpack this stuff, then there's a lot of things that can come up. And in this podcast, we just address some of the things to be aware of when coming face to face with our own illusions of self-image. Stay tuned for this episode. Hello and welcome to the Sacred Gates here on YouTube. My name is Illura. Welcome back to the YouTube channel. Great to have you here listening. Today we're just going to touch lightly on the path of discovery when we discover and realize that we've lived a lot of our life projecting, as many of us do, an image of ourselves. And it can be very disturbing sometimes to realize this, especially if what we've done in order to maintain that image of ourselves has been really destructive to us and our life path. Often we look back after our 20s, sometimes we look back after our 30s, sometimes we get into our 40s, sometimes even older, and we're looking back and kind of shaking our head. You know, I'm thinking of that face palm emoji where we're just like, oh man, I can't believe I can't believe I'm still doing it. Sometimes we haven't let it go. And the awareness, we don't always have someone to unpack. I mean, many of us see therapists. There are great therapists out there. There can be, people online that speak to us, indirectly just through a YouTube channel, for example, or a podcast, or we can read something that triggers the awareness of this self-image, and I will say it's often illness that makes us realize that we have been taxing ourselves and sacrificing so much that our health. And often it's a disease or a complete breakdown of the immune system that brings us back to a point of balance and makes us look at life, or an injury as well. An accident can also cause that. So one of the things I just wanted to bring up when we're going through that process is a lot of things to deconstructing, discovering, dissolving those illusions of self. But one of the things that can happen that I just wanted to point out, because it's not always obvious, especially if it's our first time kind of going through this process, is that, because there are many layers and it can take time over the years to do it, but one of the things that we have a tendency to do is that when we come into the first time level of awareness of that self-image, of course we naturally have an aversive feelings towards that self-image. And that can feel and be quite an emotional reaction to what we realized we've been. And of course, when we realize we've swung one way, we have a tendency to swing, humans have a tendency to swing all the way to the other side. And what that can look like is completely turning our back and not wanting to be associated with that image. We don't want to be that anymore. And part of that mechanism of not wanting to be something anymore and having a huge aversion to it is to then crave something else. And what we can often do is end up kind of swapping one image for another. And what we want to do is not actually have an image particularly at all. Of course, there's an image of etiquette, like we dress politely for a job interview, for example. We have to behave certain ways in public. The way you behave, just say in church or at a wedding ceremony is different to how you behave, on a Wednesday night at 8 p.m. at home on the couch, So these are important kind of etiquettes, or I think etiquette, the word in French, means like a pathway through a certain place. So it helps you pass through. But I'm talking about those kinds of images that had us basically seeking love, acceptance, belonging, to belong from those around us, but through unhealthy ways, which often come from the way we were taught as children from our first bonds, which is in our family. So if you're in the process of dissolving those pillars, those constructs and conditions that we were brought up with, and you're realizing who you've become or who you are or who you've been, and you want to get rid of that, the answer is not to then swing the other way and then want to become, just say, the opposite of that image. Or become, sometimes if we're on a spiritual path, we want to then become just pure light. We have this real desire just to be in the light. And that comes from having corrupted ourselves. We then want to be, have real self-love and be unconditional with ourselves. And that's all good. But often that'll actually just be that act, like I was saying, of swapping another image for another one, swapping the old one for the new one. And it comes with kind of wanting to get rid of the old me, So just a warning around that. And what allows you, from my experience, to not fall into that. One, it's awareness. It's having an awareness, not just of the little details of who you've been and really uncovering all of that, which is really important, but it's looking at almost it all at a principle level, a principle based. So if you're looking at how the image works, personality works, your craving to be loved, your need to be loved, but the way that you've gone about it, and you kind of look at it all from a higher, larger, wider, more expanded, aware perspective, you can see then and be more aware of how you could easily repeat that again if you're not careful. So that you've got the awareness, you're accepting through the awareness of that larger, more expanded perspective, you realize that you come with an ego, you come with a lower self, that's part of who you are. You're not a Buddha yet, you're not enlightened yet, and that your lower self is coming along for the ride, and it's your higher perspective that's going to help educate and communicate to your lower self that you're now taking care of that lower self, so it doesn't need to behave in those same ways, that's going to start to dissolve through your expanded awareness and understanding of things, and that is what supports you from not getting and adopting onto it, clutching and craving onto a new and projecting a new image of yourself, your new idea of who you are, the better you. And that's at the cost of rejecting the old stuff. Now, what happens when we reject things? They come back up. It's a little bit like having a rash. You put some cortisone cream, it disappears suddenly. You're very happy because it's gone, and then it reemerges somewhere else on your body, and it's way worse. So that's the kind of laws, the universal laws when it comes to suppression and repression. They just come back up again. So part of the awareness that we go, and expanded awareness, is taking in the whole gamut, the whole picture, and that allows spaciousness. It happens through relaxing, not getting all fearful and anxious about it, but actually seeing, giving yourself time and space, that it's a journey. Sorry to use that word. I know it's always used in that way. It's a journey. And you give yourself space, and within that spaciousness of your awareness, you can take in the whole picture, and you're also able to leave room for the old parts, the old image that you may still be clinging to slightly, but you're letting go of as you allow more awareness in of who you are, who you've been, the acceptance of the presence of the lower self. But the lower self is different if you have a wiser, higher self-awareness of the lower self. That's what the lower self needs. It's a little bit like a parent. The higher self is like a parent. The lower self is like the child. So the more awareness you have of the whole thing, the whole spectrum of who you are, the more then you're able to integrate it as opposed to reject it. The more likely you're more likely to adopt a healthy and integrate your spiritual higher self into who you are, your personality, when you accept your lower self, as opposed to rejecting the lower self and then looking for a new image, a new way to fit into the world. How am I going to fit in now? That's not the higher self's goal for you and plan for you. That's not your higher self's consciousness speaking. That's the lower self looking for another self-image. So then another way, so it's expanded awareness, but then also with that expanded awareness comes more integration of your higher self. And as you integrate more of your higher self, you integrate your higher self light, which is knowledge, consciousness, and it changes your resonance. And so who you are becomes more in resonance with your higher self, who your higher self is, what your higher self is about. And so much of that should be reflected or is reflected through your practice. So your practice, whether it's whatever it is that you're doing that's working for you and helping you become a better person and better values, and helping you to dissolve your attachment to things like your self-image and help your personality to reflect more of your spiritual attributes and skills that are developing you on your path, then the more who you are and your image, in a sense, is going to become more of what your higher self is about. And that should be reflected in your practice, and that your practice feeds into your higher self feeds into your practice. It's like this beautiful life-giving cycle to you that increases your spiritual light and connection. So that's just what we wanted to share about that process of digging deep and doing that very deep inner work of realizing who you've been, why you behaved like that. Often we look back on our teens and we feel really ashamed. It's kind of a natural response. But again, you were very young and you made a lot of mistakes. I know I did. And even in my 20s, all of my 20s, I was kind of out there doing things that weren't great for me. So it's about giving yourself time to integrate those mistakes and put them in the perspective of the higher self. And that comes through your practice, or that comes through your ability to relax and soften and open into spaciousness, which gives so many aspects of you literally more space to live and be and breathe. And you know what happens when you take a step back from an artwork or a puzzle or an assignment or a relationship? You get more perspective. That is actually the energetic, karmic, spiritual, mental, emotional response to more physical space as well, like actually getting space. And that physical space is created in your body through relaxing and softening, which are the principles of the Teishara lineage and what the Sacred Gates is founded upon and all our healing is founded upon. So if you would like to learn more about that, make sure you subscribe to this channel, and you can also receive our monthly newsletters, and we'll be posting new episodes soon. Thanks so much for tuning in, guys. Bye-bye for now.